Hello everyone, my name is TheMadScorpyon and welcome to another Destiny 2 video. In the next string of videos that will be similarly titled to this one, I'm going to be covering the variety of elements that will be every part of every Prismatic subclass for all three characters. In this one, I will start off covering all of the arc parts of Prismatic, and giving you ideas of what they can do for your subclass, how you can mix and match them, as well as some exotics you can take with you before you find the perfect class item to pair with this new set. Starting off with Arc Hunters, the super that will be available will be Storm's Edge, which is basically just the straight up new one, where you get an arc energized knife that you throw to different areas and teleport to, creating a large AoE of arc damage in all areas. It is unknown whether or not it'll jolt anything or do anything more than just jolting, blinding, or just straight up damage as of now, so bear with me. But just to go over some of the things that Arc does, right off the bat, you can see Jolted and Blind right here, where Jolting makes it so the target is energized with destructive arc light. They take additional damage while jolted and chain lightning to near targets. Jolt also will stun Overload champions, so it is nifty for anti-champion in that aspect. And just a quick note, the type of weapon that can apply Jolted does matter when you have Volt Shot. The smaller it is, the less damage the Jolt does, but if it's something larger like a linear infusion rifle or a machine gun, if it can, it will do more damage than an SMG or a scout rifle. Just something to keep in mind going forward. As well, Arctos has access to Blind, which is basically blinding grenades, but reworked for Arc, that does stun unstoppable champions, so it is also nifty for that. As well, there is something called Amplified, which it makes it so your movement speed and weapon handling are greatly increased, and after sprinting for a short time, your movement speed is further increased. Rapidly defeating any sort of targets with arc damage can make you amplified, so even if you don't have a guaranteed way to access it through your aspects, you can get it naturally just by doing arc damage. From that point as well, the variety of abilities that we have is the Marksman Dodge for dodging, reloading your weapons that you're holding. The jump is the high jump, which is the lesser of the jumps in my opinion, but you'll have access to all of them anyway, as well as blink, so don't worry about that. The melee is going to be combination blow, which is probably the best option, making it so that you can punch things, get better melee damage, and of course refilling your class ability, aka your dodge, and restoring small amount of health. So it's really easy to chain this into a variety of melee attacks. And the grenade will also be the Arc Bolt grenade, which is pretty nifty on its own right, but at the same time, it's just kind of there. It deals damage, but it doesn't do anything to anything exactly naturally. It's just straight up arc damage. Then for the aspects, it is the one that we don't currently have access to. It is the Ascension aspect, which is the upper, or the vertical twirl. So if you want to use that, that is fine, but at the same time, that is going to be the only way that you can kind of make use of an arc aspect on arc, but that is pretty much that. While running Prismatic, you'll likely want to use the double-edged class items that are going to have two different perks that are way more neutral, but if you want something more arc-focused before you can get the perfect roll, I would always recommend something like Liar's Handshake, because with Combination Blow, this is a perfect thing. This just straight up increases melee damage and also does a little bit of healing, not to mention how easy it is to proc, considering using Combination Blow is literally punch, kill, dodge, punch, kill, dodge. It becomes incredibly useful, especially from the fact that you are going to be in the trenches constantly punching, and this does activate as well after taking damage from other melee attacks, so this is something I always would recommend. On that same note, I would of course always recommend Star Eater Scales as well, just because this is a great neutral game exotic for the hunters, where you gain additional super energy from your orbs. When your super is full, you can overcharge it, you gain overshield, do healing when you cast your super, just a lot of different things. Not to mention the always classic Foe Tracer that I don't currently have equipped, but basically, to give you an idea, it's one of those ones that is it's very elemental variety. Damaging a powerful combatant or guardian with abilities grant you temporary bonus damage to a weapon that matches your subclass, so any arc weapons you have while equipping Storm's Edge. And defeating targets with a weapon will also create an elemental pickup, i.e. Ionic Traces. Ionic Trace, a bolt of pure arc energy that travels along the ground seeking the creator. When picked up, Ionic Traces grant ability energy. It is broad, it gives you every sort of energy you have, so it is really good in terms of just giving you broad energy flat out. Now, in terms of Prismatic, there's a few things that I would just say to ignore right off the bat. One or two of them would be Raiden Flux, Raiju's Harness, as well as Blight Ranger, because they all affect Arc Staff specifically. They will definitely not be worth using on Storm's Edge, so if you thought about using them, I unfortunately would say don't touch them just yet. As well, things like Assassin's Cowl and more of the neutral game exotics that hunters have, I would probably recommend, because Assassin's Cowl is general. Same with Worm Husk if you need a little bit of more energy. But from that point, I might say Dragon Shadow if you're looking for a buff for your dodge. But like I said, most of the neutral game exotics on Hunter would work, although I would discount anything that's more specific, especially if it was something, everything that is Arc Staff Affliction, just because, again, it won't be working for you Hunters. Moving to the Arc Titan and what it has access to. Starting off the very front page, we do have probably the greatest options in the form of Thunder Crash, which is just straight up damage, nothing else to be said there. And then we also have the basic Rally Barricade on top of having Thruster down the line, which having both options for mobility and defense will always be good. Not to mention, of course, Towering Barricade. All of these will likely be available, although Thruster, I think, is unlocked through the Strand part of Prismatic, and Rally Barricade comes with the Arc part of Prismatic. You also have the Strafe Lift off of Arc, and for the melee, we do have Thunder Clap, which compared to the other two is probably going to be the best option for most people. Everyone understands a press and hold to charge, as well as a variety of other things. Not to mention, it does have a few exotics that work specifically with it. Not to mention that for the grenade, we do have Pulse Grenades, which is probably something that is not so terrible. I personally would have picked something else, but at the same time, it is there. And for our aspect, it will be the Knockout, which I think everyone was hoping for. Basically, anytime you hurt something to a critical degree, it gives you a buff that makes it so your melee attacks are arc and increases your melee range for a short time, and defeating targets with melee attacks will heal you and also generate Amplify for you. Now, from that aspect, there are actually a few things that I would say would work for the arc part of Prismatic. Of course, one of the easiest ones to say would be Curious of the Falling Star, of course, to buff Thunder Crash. It is just more damage. You gain Overshield on it. It is almost a non-variable if you wish to use this for this part of Prismatic. And for the melee specifically, something like Point Content Cannon Brace does work specifically with Thunderclap, and it is always a good option. It restores melee, jolts the nearby area, is really good against Overload champions, and also Amplified does benefit it, so it is a good choice. But then as well, there is always Insurmountable Skull Fort, which will just make it so that any of your Thunderclaps can just straight up regen, and gives you additional health regen on top of it. So there is awesome options all around. And not to mention, I don't have it on me, but another good one, well, I was thinking of one, but another good one would actually be Severance Enclosure, considering it is based on any elemental attacks. And with the variety of elements you'll be doing it, this is neutral, so it is an option if you just want pure damage and an ad clear. Then as well, for some of the more neutral ones, there is, of course, Armamentarium for more grenade charges. If you just want more, there's always the neutral one. Same with Heart of Inmost Light. It is always just a flat-out grenade ability, as well as melee and barricade ability. Anything that you want to use will just be buffed by it. And of course, there is a variety of other things that I would say is nifty enough. Something I wouldn't generally recommend might actually be Eternal Warrior. It does work, although it does work outside of Fist of Havoc, but at the same time, you won't have access to it, so you won't have the total deal on that part. And looking at the variety of other things, Icefall might work just because it, of course, is neutral, but it is more benefited by stasis. Things like ACDs and other various neutral game exotics could work with Arc Titan. However, like I said, I probably recommended the things I would probably use more often. Things like Peregrine won't work for the Arc part just because, again, you don't have your Arc shoulder charge. Even if there is other shoulder charges out there that you could work with, I probably wouldn't recommend it specifically for the Arc part, though. And then moving on to our Arc Warlock bits of Prismatic. Starting off the front page, you do have ad clear options in the form of Storm Trance. Very good at just clearing out lots of everything. It jolts on the way through, and of course does stun Overload champions, so that's always something great. Then for the class abilities, it doesn't specify anything specific, but then again, there isn't that many, so I believe it was given Phoenix Dive, which isn't exactly Arc, but I think that's what comes along the Arc tree. Then, going through the melees and everything, there is only two options, but it is the Chain Lightning, which is a simple just jolting and amplifying. It does say it jolts, but doesn't say specifically, so I'm not sure if it does officially do the definition of jolting, but is benefited from amplifying, adding effects to its chain abilities. And for the grenade itself, it is the Storm Grenade, which I am very much a fan of, just because I love this grenade. But then again, it is just good area damage on top of being solid damage. For the aspect you do get access to, it is the Lightning Surge, which sliding forward, you do call down more lightning, and it is a slight teleport and jolts everything. It is a good thing to eradicate anything nearby if you wish to just get rid of them. Now for Arc Warlocks, honestly, they do have a variety of options they can take. Crown of Tempest is always something good because anything Arc that happens will of course just enhance your Arc ability recharge. Not to mention if it would apply to a variety of other things that could be good. And it does extend Storm Trance, which very much a good option if you just want to flat out more Arc ability uptime and everything else like that, as well as Fallen Sunstar, which might be a little bit more neutral game just because it makes Ionic Traces, and Ionic Traces work for any ability, not anything specifically, plus it just makes it, like I said, Ionic Traces do work better. Forgot to mention it in the upcoming section I talk about Arc Weapons, but with Fallen Sunstar, if you want to keep up the Ionic Traces roll, Cold Heart is always an option where just straight up generating damage will occasionally spawn Ionic Traces out of the blue, so a good thing to remember there. Not to mention a variety of other things that can work playing with it, like Storm Dancer's Brace if you just want more super energy. Basically, anytime you defeat something, you gain damage as well as a refund for Storm Trance at the end of it, which is another option that is specific. And there are a few neutral game exotics that I would recommend, like I Have Another World for just better ability regen, and Verity's Brow for grenade recharge and damage with your teammates if you want to be a little bit more support-wise. I would actually also recommend Getaway Artist because that is arc grenade specific, so anything you have access to can always work as long as it was an arc grenade, so that could be something that turns out nifty. Now there is a few other things like Vesper Radius that I might say, things like Chromatic Fire that is always multi-element that would be good. However, something I would say against is of course Geomag, as that is a Chaos Reach or armor buff, which not having access to our Chaos Reach, it probably would not work for anything there. Now looking through the weapons that you could take use of, that is just going to be the broad tone that could be a little bit more arc part specific. Bad Juju, just straight up, it is more super energy on kill. It is not generally any one element. If you just want more super energy or want to do more light or dark damage or just have a constant kinetic damage you can use for a transference, you can always do that. On top of that as well, speaking of abilities, Traveler's Chosen is always an option. It's basically just more abilities the more you kill, which again, it's just more and more if you always want a simple option to gain ability energy. For the energy slot, there is lots of options from the classic Risk Runner and Chain Lightning to Trinity Ghoul for its Volt Shot variety, Symmetry for just straight up arc damage, and it is getting a buff up and coming. Hard Light, obviously because of elemental rotation, not to mention Borealis that also has elemental rotation. And Cloud Strike, things like that. The Hunter, Edge of Intent for the Hunters. Trespasser, possibly Centrifuge, makes very good work of Amplify. And Exdirus if you wanted an option that was specifically for Arc. But then moving into the power, of course, there is lots of different arc things you can play with. Darcy if you want an easy jolt application. Acreus if you just wanted pure damage. Worldline Zero is a good sword if you just wanted to be up and close. Anarchy, Thunderlord, the maybe Queenbreaker with a buff. There is several options you can go for, as well as Grand Overture if you want blinding on top of just good damage. But from that point, that is pretty much everything I wanted to go over in this video. Yes, there is, of course, many more elements to go. I will be covering each of them retrospectively in another video like this, where I cover the aspects and the parts for every class. We'll cover some exotics that can buff it if you want just a specific exotic as opposed to the double. But from that point, I'll also give you a few recommendations on elemental exotics if you want to spec out for one element more so than another. With that, my name is TheMadScorpyon. I thank you for watching.